Hi there, good evening and welcome to this special broadcast on Republic TV. Looking Forward is about stories that are shaping up over the coming week or weeks. News that is developing and would have consequences for your life and mine and impact our choices. Stories that shape India's and world's politics, geopolitics and geoeconomics going forward. Early in the morning, the United States carried out decapitating strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities in Fordo, Isfahan and Natanz to claim complete decimation of Iran's nuclear infrastructure. President Trump quickly called for peace after that, and while the Americans, with their statements, sought to provide a ramp-off, Israel is still wanting to settle more scores with Iran. Is the objective regime change? Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has denied, but Israel wants to be at it. While you have watched all developments through the day, tonight, in story number 1, I bring to you a 360-degree review of what are the possibilities in Iran if Ayatollah Khamenei goes. He, in fact, nominated his 3 possible successors just yesterday, suggesting he could be the target of a joint Israeli-American strike. Whichever regime replaces Khamenei, would it be pro-West or more anti-West? Whether it would be good for India or not? Who after Khamenei? We shall explore in story number 1. And story number 2 is connected with the developments in the Middle East still. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is having its Leaders Summit in the Netherlands on Tuesday and Wednesday this coming week. Trump has been throwing a wrecking ball, as we know, at NATO since his first term. Europe is effectively on its own. With the Iran strikes, America has sent a message of peace with its strength, while in case of Europe, it clamors for peace without its strength to impose it. Like G7 last week, would the NATO summit this coming week see the US-Europe fracture play out yet again? That's our focus. Sit back for the next 1 hour, friends. Let's begin with the headlines of the day. US bombs Iran in the early hours today. US military struck 3 sites in Iran, directly joining Israel's efforts to decapitate the country's nuclear program. American Air Force's B-2 bombers carrying out targeted strikes on Iranian nuclear sites in Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan. In his post-attack address to the nation, President Trump called the strikes a spectacular military success and said Iran's nuclear sites were completely and totally obliterated. The US bombers that attacked the nuclear sites dropped bunker-busting bombs called GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators for the first time in modern warfare history. Iran responded by claiming that the bombings were directly related to derailing of diplomacy that Iran was trying on the issue of its nuclear program. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is slated to be in Moscow and meet President Putin tomorrow over the emerging situation in West Asia. In a late evening move, Iran's parliament also decided to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, which carries 1/5 of global crude oil and natural gas supplies, thus suggesting an all-out retaliation. And in its first direct military response to the US strikes, Iran launched missile attack, causing significant damage across several Israeli cities, escalating regional tensions. Iran reportedly fired 27 missiles in 2 batches at Haifa and Tel Aviv, injuring at least 11 people. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to President Masoud Pezeshkian of Iran in the phone call. While expressing concern, Prime Minister called for immediate de-escalation and for dialogue and diplomacy as the way forward for restoration of peace and stability in the region. All right, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it was earlier this week that Trump quite literally issued a threat to the supreme leader of Iran that he exactly knows where he was hiding. A threat not taken lightly by anyone, especially given the rapid escalation of events since June 13 in Israel's Operation Rising Lion that has struck sites across Iran, both nuclear and military targets, with impunity. However, the number one question remains on everyone's mind: what is the US's true intention vis-à-vis Iran? It's natural to ask when Trump says he wants something much more than a ceasefire, but won't say what it is exactly. Is it just about a nuclear deal, or is there another regime change operation in the motion? And if yes, then who after Khamenei, as I asked earlier? Our next report helps you decode just that. Take a look.
West Asia is at war.
Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do.
With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days.
But is this war just about a deal?
Why didn't you negotiate? I said to the people, why didn't you negotiate with me 2 weeks ago?
President Trump will do what's best for America. I trust his judgment.
Is this all just a cover?
There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close.
That's what the Ayatollah Khamenei says that he would do. He would use these weapons to wipe Israel off the map. Well, he's not going to. We're not going to let him.
Or is this more than meets the eye?
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision.
Does it boil down to a regime change operation?
Assassination of head of state and Please remember, Ayatollah Khamenei is more than a head of state. He's a religious leader. It's like, talking about taking down any other major religious figure. So it's not something which one should talk lightly.
To even suggest that is putting words in the president's mouth. He has been very clear, actually since 2011, that Iran must never have a nuclear weapon. And right now, the Israeli military is doing a great job taking out Iran's, not only their nuclear capability, but also their ballistic missile capability, which is a win for Iran, a win for the Middle East, and a win for the world.
Well, it seemed very unlikely, but it can happen. Americans have not stated it as their objective for the time being, although Israel has put it down as a war objective. Now it seems to me that it is of very little consequence, because if one Ayatollah goes, somebody else might come.
If Khamenei dies, it's very unclear what will happen. It's unclear if the Islamic Republic will stay in power, which is likely. It's unclear who will be appointed. There is no defined Iranian opposition, so nobody knows if they are capable of placing somebody as interim caretaker prime minister. It's not clear what direction the Iranian body politic wants to go, because they don't like it when outsiders intervene in their affairs. Nothing is clear if Ayatollah Khamenei dies.
I don't think there would be a disorderly transition. I'm sure the Iranians have prepared for contingency. They have a well-established system, and there is a system for electing a successor to a supreme leader. So I think that will be set in motion. It cannot be assumed that this will automatically lead to a regime change or collapse.
And Ambassador Srivastava may be onto something. Ayatollah Khamenei has even named 3 senior clerics as candidates to succeed him should he be killed. However, it is being reported that Ayatollah Khamenei's son is not the part of the list. Next in line could be Ali Reza Arafi, Deputy Chair of the Assembly of Experts in the Guardian Council, a long-term trusted aide of the Supreme Leader. Or could be Khamenei's Chief of Staff Mohammad Galpayani, who manages every aspect of Khamenei's office, or even his political security head, who oversees all intelligence in Iran and serves as a key advisor. One thing is clear. The American view increasingly believes that Ayatollahs must go.
Ever since the Ayatollahs took over in Iran in the 1980s, they have been a virus that has infected not only the Middle East, but the world. Their radical brand of Islam is counterthetical to the teachings of Islam. They are the world's largest supporters of terror. If the mullahs in Iran were not in power, the world would be a better place.
But can there be an alternative leadership in Iran if the Ayatollah is gone?
Well, it can be, because you see, Ayatollahs were transposed on that country after the overthrow of Shah. If the clerics and their hold over the country wanes in the event of a very decisive defeat in the ongoing conflict, and if they have to surrender in terms of surrender their nuclear weapon program, there would be loss of prestige for the clerics, and in that situation some other force, some other groups might emerge. It is quite possible. I would not be surprised at all.
There is a chance that should the Islamic Republic fall, the Iranians will elect political leadership that is more pro-Western, or that wants to bring more democracy or more civil rights. I don't know if that will happen immediately. And again, I don't think the regime will fall. But even if it does, I'm not sure that will happen immediately because, again, Iran was attacked. A lot of Iranians are now scared and angry because Iran was attacked regardless of who is in charge politically.
Amidst all the internal chaos, there is one man sitting in the United States who is quite eager to make a re-entry into Iran. His name, Reza Shah Pahlavi, Crown Prince in exile of Iran.
من سالها کوشیدم تا میهنمان گرفتار آتش جنگ نشود. پایان جمهوری اسلامی، پایان جنگ 46 ساله آن با ملت ایران است. دستگاه سرکوب رژیم در حال فروپاشی است. تنها یک خیزش همگانی لازم است تا این کابوس برای همیشه پایان یابد. اکنون زمان ایستادن است. زمان بازپسگیری ایران.
I don't think that the people in Iran, by and large, have any appetite for return to monarchy or the system of monarchy or descendants of the monarch.
Why should the people of Iran believe that you have their best interests in mind? Because you lived in the United States for a large part of your life. You moved there well in your 20s. You've lived outside Iran and you're very vocal about the situation in Iran. Some people would see you as a Western prop. How would you respond to that? That you're taking a certain political line which would go well with the West but not be in the interests of the Iranian people. This charge is something I want you to respond to as directly as possible.
That's very easy to prove. All you have to do is to monitor Iranian social media. All you have to do is to look at various polls that have been done about what level of support or popularity I have in Iran. These are not polls conducted by me. It's in fact conducted by elements who are not necessarily my sympathizers. And you will see right there and then the amount of respect and trust that they have in what I've been doing and the legacy of my family. The fact that I was physically away from my country doesn't mean for a second that I'm not aware of everything that is happening in my country every single day, in all of the smallest details.
There is absolutely no chance of Reza Pahlavi making a return to Iran and being accepted by Iranian people. There are always dissensions in any government or society. But that does not mean that they would accept someone who has lived in exile for such a long period. In fact, most of his adult life.
Then again, the question continues to remain. What will the Americans do?
First of all, Donald Trump and the Americans are not going to take down the Ayatollah. What Israel has said and what Israel has pushed into Iran, and I believe what would be the best result is if the Iranian people themselves rose up against the Islamic dictator in Iran, and they revolted, and then the Iranian people themselves would establish a democracy. That being said, there will not be American boots on the ground. America is, we would love to have friendly relations with a democratic Iran. I think the Iranian people deserve as much, and the world certainly can do a heck of a lot better than we've seen from the theocratic leadership in Iran since the 1980s.
Iran is a status quo state, and you look at their record. Iran, and under this regime only, when I say this regime, means the same supreme leader and the system of governance. They want to do more business with the West, and including US. This has been their attempt since the negotiations started. I was there from 2011 to 2014. The bar came from the US side, and Europeans were doing good business, much bigger, trade than we have with Iran. Iranian regime or Iranian government cannot be, by any stretch of imagination, be called a radical regime. But certainly, if it goes, or if there's a change, again, I treat it as a hypothetical question. The next regime will be more hardliner towards Israel and towards the West in case it is brought about through American intervention.
The Iranian ballistic missile directly hit the Soroka hospital in Beersheba.
All right, friends, you got a lowdown on what are the possibilities in case Khamenei goes or has to go. Joining me for a brief conversation on what are the possibilities, we have to give us an American view, Adrian Calamil. He's a terrorism and Middle East scholar, and he's a fellow at the Arabian Peninsula Institute and author of a book on Hezbollah. So he understands Iran and Iran's proxies in the geography. But tonight we have Iranian expert joining us, Khosrow Isfahani. He's originally an Iranian, now based out of the United States, it seems. He's someone who's been with the National Union for Democracy in Iran. He's someone who has fought for human rights. Apart from that, he has been teaching at Colby College in Maine in the United States, as also, I believe, some visiting fellowships and scholarships at the University of Berkeley and the UCLA's Promise Institute. So that's the introduction of two of our guests. I would want to begin with you, Khosrow. And my first question to you, where is Ayatollah Khamenei likely to be tonight?
The supreme leader, since the strikes have started, has crawled in a hole in the ground, scared for his life and for his legacy. Since hour zero that the strikes started, this man who throughout his rule has boasted about being courageous and ready for martyrdom while putting the lives of thousands and thousands on the line is now in hiding. That's where the supreme leader is. We haven't seen him. We haven't heard from him. He has released 2 messages from his bunker. In these 2 messages, he has departed from his old tradition of constantly revoking Islamic values and talk of shahadat and jihadism and switched to calls of nationalism and rallying around Iran's flag. That's where the supreme leader is right now.
And Khosrow, it seems that there was this apprehension among the Iranian agencies that maybe the Americans, apart from taking down Fordo, might make an attempt and hit Khamenei. So that's why yesterday we have this news development that the supreme leader has anointed or named 3 possible successors. That does not include his son Mujtaba. Tell us, who are these clerics, if you have an idea, because you closely track your country. Are these people more hardline or less hardline vis-a-vis Khamenei? Who are they?
So first, to make something very clear, the reports that are coming out about Khamenei's succession are coming out from journalists with a history of pushing lines that we have found inaccurate. Anything that are passed from sources within the Islamic Republic establishment, some journalists think that they are fact and publish them and go on air and talk about them. So I have big question marks about what these reports say about succession of the Ayatollah. The clerics that have been named in these reports, and in general, all the top echelon of the cleric establishment in Iran, none of them have the capital or capacity to fill the shoes of Ayatollah Khamenei. They don't have any social backing. They don't even have the backing of powerful political circles within the Islamic Republic. So the question itself that any of these Ayatollahs or clerics can succeed Khamenei, in my opinion, is moot.
Right.
If Khamenei is taken out, the whole regime can collapse.
You know, Khosrow, Khamenei himself is 86, so does not qualify as a young man. So obviously, if not now, maybe sometime later, somebody would have to be found to replace him. Why not Mujtaba? Was this news plan done to save Mujtaba's life so that he does not become a target of an assassination bid by the Israelis or the Americans?
So that can be part of the scenario going through the minds of the Islamic Republic officials or intelligence services. But the thing with Mujtaba is that he has never held any public office. He has zero political capital. No one likes him. The man, when he was issuing a video statement a year and a half ago in response to some internal crisis, he had to read the statement from a text on paper, and he cannot deliver 3 lines without faltering and not being able to even talk. You're talking about a context that the key for leadership, whoever is going to be the leader at any position in Iran, a key factor is the ability to be able to talk to large crowds. And Mujtaba has never shown any talent, any capacity for leadership, for building political circles. He has been attached to a fringe group that was embedded within security agencies, and the only relevance he has in Iran's context come from his attachment to this circle called Halqa Habib, or the Habib Circle. It's made up of a bunch of IRGC commanders and intelligence officers.
Okay.
Some of them, a large portion of them, are already dead.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that we profiled in the package we showed. But then, Khosrow, Adrian, just bear with me. I am asking some relevant questions to Khosrow, and then I come to you. My next question is, since you do a lot of open source intelligence, plus, of course, Khosrow, you would have connections. You would be speaking to people in Tehran and other places in Israel. Isfahan, which was hit, it seems to be your original place, as your surname suggests. Tell me, what's the situation on the ground? Are we seeing any buildup of resentment, rebellion, any cues you are getting that maybe if a situation emerges, a trigger is provided, the people might come out on the streets and want themselves that the regime of Ayatollah Khamenei go?
So let me lay the ground here. Point one, people in Iran have been resisting against the Islamic Republic since 1979. The resentment against this regime has only been building up over the decade. We are talking of a regime that has pilfered the wealth of this nation, has destroyed its civilian infrastructure, has killed innocent protesters on the streets, has raped, has murdered, has killed women for showing too much hair. So this is the regime that we are dealing with. It is deeply hated by the people inside Iran. With every military officer, with every IRGC commander killed in any type of operation over the past decade, you just look at the different examples. Look at Qasem Soleimani that President Trump took out during his first term. People have coined a nickname for him. He's called Cutlet in Iran because when he was killed, his body was minced. Every year on the anniversary of his death, people make this food and celebrate his death. That's how deeply this regime is hated. That's point one. And sorry I'm taking too much time, but I want to add, since the strikes have started, people in Iran, families of victims of this regime, have launched multiple online campaigns because streets are extremely unsafe these days. In addition to the strikes, the regime has set up checkpoints, armed checkpoints, to even stop people from fleeing urban areas. But under these circumstances, and despite over 300 people getting arrested, Iranians are posting material on social media saying that our enemy is not Israel, our enemy is right here, and it's the Islamic Republic. Another post reads that no one is happy about war, no one likes war. People are happy because the butchers of their children are being killed. So that's the general mood among a large portion of the Iranian society. This community doesn't want the Islamic Republic and wants it gone.
Right. Okay. Khosrow, now let me go to Adrian for a bit. Adrian, while Pete Hegseth, your defense secretary, in that briefing that happened just a couple of hours back, made it absolutely clear that regime change was not part of the mission objectives that they have carried out. But there is a long history of animosity between the United States and Iran for US to really want a regime change to happen. So if it happens, obviously America would facilitate, right?
Well, great question. It wasn't the objective, but it could very well be the outcome. The nuclear program, Ali Khamenei and the people of Iran know this, has spent trillions of dollars trying to build this so that he could threaten the region, only to line his pockets and the pockets of people around him. Now, there will come a time when the Iranian people will rise up. And I think that's what a lot of us are just waiting for here. Hegseth was right. This was the objective. But Ali Khamenei said repeatedly, I've heard this from sources inside, outside Iran, that he believes it's critical to the survival of his regime. And Fordo was a crown jewel, and now that's been eliminated. So the next step is what happens from here. And it's media silence in the Islamic Republic. They shut down the internet just like they did when they murdered 1,500 people in 2019. So they're doing the same right now. So the reports aren't coming out, but I would expect to see defections. I would expect to see and hopefully see elements of the Artesh peel away. Lower levels of the IRGC who don't get paid, who are just in this to collect a paycheck and are sick of brutalizing their people. The besieged, those individuals, even lower on the pay scale, they're tired of it. I've seen during the Mahsa Amini protests, I've seen these thugs, one actually just sobbing on the streets and going to his mother and saying he's done with this. So this has been we could say it started back in 1979, but it started to reach 2017 December, we started to see roaming protests around the countryside. Regime was unable to deal with these. And then it all came, it went through multiple stages. You had the 2019 massacre, Abadan. You also have the Mahsa Amini murder. This is, what we saw before, especially after Mahsa Amini, it looked like Iran was in full revolution mode. I think that we're right on the precipice of that right now.
All right.
And I do think there's a logical successor to come behind, and that would be not so much a successor, but a transitional figure that really wants to support the Iranian people.
What if, Adrian, my question is, what if the next person who comes is perhaps even more hardline than Ayatollah Khamenei? At least via Pakistan or via some other channels, at least you had some lines of communication with the present regime. What if the other person coming is, it's an unknown, as Donald Rumsfeld would have said. And as they say, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know.
Yeah, but the devil we know is the devil we know, and the devil we don't know that's lying below has been wiped out, okay? Their bench has been cleared. There's nobody to fill that position. Everybody that's in technical positions related to the military, anybody in the aerospace industry, anybody that's involved with the nuclear program, they are gone. So who are you going to fill it with? It's about regime collapse. And when it collapses, and the Iranian people, all they needed was to take back this country themselves. Tyrannies, regimes, dynasties, empires, they all collapsed from a lot of the same reasons, and the Islamic Republic was a toxic too. You had government misrule, corruption, you had failure to adapt a true economy, external trade, nepotism, central government and military overextended, constant wars, draining the treasury and the nuclear program. You have a succession problem now. These are the things that collapse regimes.
Okay.
Period. End of discussion. If you look through history, that's the story.
Okay.
Ottoman Empire.
Understood. Last question to Khosrow. Khosrow, We, in that package, saw Shah Raza Pahlavi, and there have been some statements coming in from him. Is he, by any chance, a possibility? Like, does he have any element of support on the ground there in Tehran or other parts of Iran?
He's one of the key political figures. He's you can argue that among the position groups and figures, he's the most prominent, most known, with a legacy, with a clear message, with a program for transition. Yes, he's one of the most known figures. But I'm going to borrow a line from Shahzadeh Reza Pahlavi to answer your question. We are talking of a proud nation with a history of upholding culture despite invasion and war. This nation will take back its future in its own hands. As your other guest said, this nation will eventually, if not today, tomorrow, or the day after, this nation is going to rise up and write its own fate again. Iran has been occupied by the Islamic Republic that is not representative of Iranian values, of Iranian culture. The Iranian nation will rise up and take back its home soon, and then it will decide what form of governance it wants. But at its core, Iranians are a secular, democratic nation that is deeply aligned with U.S. values. Iran will again be an ally for the West in the Middle East and a safe neighbor for every country in the region.
All right, let's see how the events progress in West Asia. Remember, they have dynamics of their own. Iran has announced they are going to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, and obviously that's going to get global response, given the fact that almost 1/5 and more of world's oil and gas supplies go through that narrow waterway. And on that note, thank you so much, Khusro and Adrian, for joining us with those perspectives. We deeply appreciate that. Moving on now, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are examining the potential impact of Donald Trump's return to the NATO summit amid rising tensions, of course, in West Asia and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. The alliance of 32 nations is facing a crucial test of its long-term commitment, and one man's presence could change the course of history. Will Trump's unconventional approach pull NATO into the West Asia conflict, or will the alliance hold strong? We will dive into the details, exploring the implications for global security, the future of NATO, and of course, the world's fragile balance of power. Take a look at the details.
Leaders from all 32 NATO member countries are set to gather in the Netherlands' Hague for the annual NATO summit scheduled for June 24th and 25th. Among them is US President Donald Trump, marking his first appearance at the summit since returning to the White House for a second term. So why does this summit matter? Why is the world watching so closely?
For America and her allies, celebrations throughout the country at the end of the greatest war in history.
A relic of the Second World War, NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, came up in 1949. The world was divided into two parts, with the Iron Curtain having fallen in the middle of Europe, dividing America-led West and the USSR-led Eastern Bloc. Since then, NATO has steadily expanded, adapting to new global threats while sticking to its founding principle. At the heart of NATO lies Article 5, the cornerstone of the alliance. It declares that an attack on one member is an attack on all, allowing for collective military or non-military response. Remarkably, Article 5 has only been invoked once in NATO's history, in the wake of the 9/11 terror attacks on the United States. Fast forward to today, and the spotlight at The Hague isn't just on unity, it's on economics too. Trump's relationship with NATO has always been complicated. During his first term, he repeatedly criticized the alliance, once even calling it obsolete. President Trump is reigniting his push for NATO countries to dramatically ramp up defense spending to 5% of GDP, up from today's baseline of 2%. But here's the twist. Trump insists this target applies to all allies but not the US, which already spends roughly about 3.4% of its GDP on defense. His blunt message? Other countries must pay their fair share, especially calling out Spain and Canada as persistently underpaying.
We've been supporting NATO so long, in many cases, I believe, paying almost 100% the cost. So I don't think we should, but I think that the NATO countries should, absolutely. Spain's been a very low payer. They were always a very low payer. They were either good negotiators or they weren't doing the right thing. I mean, I think Spain has to pay what everybody else has to pay. Spain has been notorious for low pay. You know who else was a low payer, just about the lowest? A place called Canada. Because Canada said, why should we pay when the United States will protect us free?
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has proposed a more nuanced compromise, 3.5% for core defense and 1.5% for infrastructure and cyber, aiming for total parity with Trump's call, but only if all 32 members agree.
At the summit in The Hague, I expect allied leaders will agree to spend 5% of GDP on defense. It will be a NATO-wide commitment and a defining moment for the alliance. There are two parts to this new defense spending plan. 3.5% will be invested in our core military requirements, while the rest will go towards defense and security-related investments, including infrastructure and building industrial capacity. 5% is not some figure plucked from the air. It's grounded in hard facts. The fact is, we need a quantum leap in our collective defense.
NATO is a means for the United States to project power around the world. It initially was set up in 1949 so that the United States could project power in Europe. It's very much in America's interest in a militarized imperialist world to keep NATO. So Trump makes a lot of statements. What his real goal is not to pull out. His real goal is to force the Europeans to spend a lot more for their own quote-unquote defense.
This is one front for Trump versus NATO, but it's not the only one. The ongoing Russia-Ukraine war looms large over this year's summit, with the conflict now entering its third year. NATO's support has been critical. Since 2014, NATO's support for Ukraine has deepened, providing military training, intelligence, and non-lethal support. NATO, although not a sole cause, but plays a significant role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The war that has been going on from 2022 has been only worsened, with Russia now controlling major parts of Ukraine. But Trump's stance on Ukraine has raised eyebrows. During his campaign, he repeatedly suggested he could end the war in 24 hours, and then came his fiery on-camera clash with Zelensky at the Oval Office.
And your men are brave, but they have used our military.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
Not
cards.
playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
I'm very
You're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're gambling
I'm the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War III.
What do you think
You're
about?
gambling with
What do you
World
think
War
about?
III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
A clash that reminds us of the infamous war of words between Trump and NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg in 2018 at NATO summit.
Germany is just paying a little bit over 1%, whereas the United States in actual numbers is paying 4.2% of a much larger GDP. They pay billions of dollars to Russia, and now we have to defend them against Russia.
You know, NATO is an alliance of 29 nations, and there are sometimes differences and different views and also some disagreements. And the gas pipeline from Russia to Germany is one issue where allies disagree. But the strength of NATO is that despite these differences, we have always been able to unite around our core task to protect and defend each other.
But how can you be together when a country is getting its energy from the person you want protection against or from the group that you want protection?
Because you understand that when we stand together, also when dealing with Russia, we are stronger. I think what we have seen is that...
No, you're just making Russia richer.
Well,
you're not dealing with Russia, you're making Russia richer.
Well, so I think that even during the Cold War, NATO allies were trading with Russia. Then there have been disagreements about what kind of trade arrangements we should go
I think
to.
trade is wonderful. I think energy is a whole different story. I think energy is a much different story than normal trade.
The tensions didn't end there. Zelensky's invitation to this NATO summit reportedly sparked fresh debate within the alliance. Some leaders feared his presence could provoke Trump again. But ultimately, Zelensky is attending, determined to secure more aid and firm commitments from NATO partners. His appearance is being seen as a direct message to the US president. Trump's latest escalation of bombing Iran's nuclear infrastructure has dragged several NATO countries into regional flashpoints.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
While NATO traditionally limits its operations to the North Atlantic region, these developments have revived debate over Article 5, the alliance's collective defense clause. On the other hand, thousands of American troops remain stationed across bases in the Middle East. US has a sizable force in the Middle East, with nearly 40,000 troops in the region. As the US makes a direct entry into the war, it remains to be seen how the rest of the NATO countries walk the tightrope. The Russia-Ukraine war shows no signs of resolution. On the other hand, the US is now face to face with Iran in direct military confrontation. In such an unpredictable geopolitical environment, questions arise over the alliance's long-term commitment in this volatile situation. The chances of Trump pulling NATO into Middle East conflict are higher than ever.
All right, joining me for a brief conversation, Charles Kupchan from the Council of Foreign Relations. He's a former member of the National Security Council of the United States during President Bill Clinton and President Obama. And of course, he's a professor of international relations affairs at Georgetown University. Very good evening from here and morning to you, Professor Kupchan there. NATO summit at The Hague, Netherlands, agenda increase. But first up, let me ask you, which war is going to have a bigger overhang during the NATO leaders summit on Tuesday, the West Asia war or the Europe war?
Well, in some ways, the conflict that's broken out between the United States and Iran, Israel and Iran, will overshadow the conference because it's ongoing. We don't know what will happen between now and the NATO summit. The war could widen. But I do think that given this is a NATO summit and you also have a war going on in Ukraine, the allies are going to try to focus on NATO issues, on defense spending, as you were just covering in your report, and also the more difficult conversation about next steps in Ukraine. I think that the NATO allies will be hoping for and pushing toward a commitment from Donald Trump to continue sending arms to Ukraine. He has yet to make that ironclad commitment.
Okay, for that commitment to come, I believe there has to be a commensurate commitment coming in from the European allies or the Europe members of NATO. Now, the agenda is increase individual defense budget of member nations to about 5% of their GDP by 2032. As of now, only 22 of the 32 members have meet the present criterion of 2% of the GDP. So it seems like an uphill task. You think 5% by 2032 is really practical and possible?
I think it's an aspirational goal, right? The 2% goal was adopted in 2014. And only thanks to Vladimir Putin, you now have 2/3 of NATO members that are actually spending 2% of GDP on defense. Now we're looking at 3.5% on traditional defense and another 1.5% on military-related expenditures like bridges and railroads and infrastructure. I'm guessing that you will get agreement to make that commitment, in part because it is way forward. It's in the next decade when many of the leaders who are in power won't even be in office then, and they know that they need to make that kind of commitment to keep Trump happy. So I think we're probably going to get to yes on that combination. 3.5 traditional defense, 1.5 extra military expenditures.
All right. And then my question to you, Professor Kupchan, is that what we saw in G7, Trump coming out for whatever pretext, he had walked out of G7 in 2018 also. And we have seen the kind of hectoring tone the American leadership has had under President Trump vis-a-vis NATO. What are the chances that we are going to see a repeat of G7 and a repeat of the Munich Security Conference speech of J.D. Vance when these leaders meet at The Hague?
I think the G7 went off about as well as could be expected. There was no blow-up. There were no insults as there were during the first term when Trump got into a fight with Mr. Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, at the G7. In his first term, Trump also talked about withdrawing from NATO. We haven't heard any of that kind of talk in his second term. And I think that's partly because there is an ongoing war in Ukraine, and there's a palpable existential sense of fear, particularly on NATO's eastern flank, with 2 new members, Finland and Sweden. So they're deliberately keeping this summit short. From what I understand, the communique will be 1.5 to 2 pages, kept to the bare minimum. So in some respects, I think they're aiming low and hoping this is a quick and relatively painless and perhaps not that important a summit.
You seem to be very optimistic, Professor Kupchan. My last question to you before I let you go. Europe says it needs a strategic autonomy, but it comes with a price tag. You think European leaders are willing to pay the price?
Yeah, I'm basically optimistic because I think the world hems Trump in, right? You've got a big war in Ukraine. Now the United States is at war again in the Middle East. Trump doesn't have a lot of wiggle room. He needs allies. He needs countries that are willing to stand by the United States and share the burden. I think his main ask is going to be, I want you to do more. we Americans spend too much money and too many lives on this. We need your help. And I think he's going to get a yes from his NATO allies. And that's why I think at the end of the week, when this summit occurs, things are probably going to go okay.
All right. On that note, thank you so much, Professor Kupchan, with that perspective on the upcoming NATO Leaders Summit, which takes place on Tuesday and Wednesday at The Hague in the Netherlands. Friends, moving on. In fact, this coming week also marks 50 years of a dark chapter in India's otherwise strong, deep-rooted and vibrant democracy. On June 25, in 1975, the then government of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi imposed a national emergency, putting behind bars thousands of opposition leaders. Press was muzzled, judiciary was compromised, pensions and promotions became incumbent upon vasectomies. Trains ran on time, while democracy got derailed. It is an important anniversary to mark and look forward to, so that we do not forget the journey through which we have become the strong democracy that we are known to be in the world today. I would have focused on this story in great detail, but for the developments of the morning in the Middle East theater. But we shall bring to you all news and programming related to 50 years of emergency this coming week. And friends, with this, we come to an end of this edition of Looking Forward. And of course, we will be back next week with more on what's going to come up over the next week and then coming weeks. For now, thanks for watching. Be there tomorrow at 8 p.m. Super Prime Time Max with Arnab Goswami.